Before we start today's roundtable, I want to give special thanks to Checkster, our group sponsor. Checkster has become well known in the recruiting industry by providing a platform that easily captures reference checks in the hiring process. I myself have been a customer of theirs for years. I use a reference checking tool for all of my new hires. However, Checkster has now released a new product suite called Insights. This new product suite is really what has excited me to have Checkster as the group sponsor. With Insights, the Checkster platform now covers employees from cradle to grave and not just reference checking, starting when they apply, going to offer, through onboarding, then covering their work at your company, and then to the end with exit interviews. It's an easy to use, easy to understand way of giving and getting feedback from your peers. Checkster's simple goal: to build more productive and passionate teams. Now, if this concept of getting insights from your peers regarding your work sounds familiar, it should, because that's the simple goal of this group: connecting, communicating, collaborating. Support me, support the group. Follow the link below, recruiting.org/Checkster. This will take you to a landing page to sign up for a quick demo. If you are just thinking about automating your reference checking process, it'll be well worth your time. But I encourage you to check out the full Insights suite. I'd love to find out if you feel the way I feel about it. Now let's get to today's roundtable. All right, let's jump right into it. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for attending episode 61 in Let's Talk Recruiting, where peer practitioners all get together and talk about various topics in our TA industry. Today, our topic is called Your Recruiting Engine Tune-Up, 5 Things You Should Check. I think it's sort of a great timing for this piece as we go into the beginning of Q4, out of 2020 and into 2021. Hopefully we'll see some big changes, but it's 2020 is kind of, we're going to sort of get into this. Is this something we kind of call an anomaly and then keep going into 2021 or what have you? I always hear the terms pre-COVID and post-COVID. So with that said, let's jump right into it. And today, let me go through the roundtable real quick. We have Bez Rengifo out of Los Angeles. Bez, I ask you every time, did I get it right, the last name?
You did, Bez. Great job.
All right. And Terry Levy out of Nashville. You have William Uranga out of Los Angeles and Lisa Rezel out of the Chicago area. So let's jump into the conversation. And Bez, I'm going to start with you and jump it over to you. What items do you got for us?
Okay. My name is Bez Rengifo, and I've been in the industry 25 plus years. So from faxing resumes or not faxing resumes to today's climate, I've seen quite a bit. I do a lot of healthcare or tech type of recruiting or HR consulting. And today I'm going to be talking about 3 things of the 5. So my top one, I'll start with the employer value proposition. So EVP, as some people refer to it. And that, to me, that's extremely important as a recruiter or sourcer. You're trying to make matches and you're trying to find talent that fits well with your organization, or at least lines up to some of the candidates' wants and needs from the top of why they would make a move or what they're looking for in their next move. So if you have a solid employer value proposition, then you can articulate that to the candidates you're recruiting. And some of the things, will be from on the outside of that circle: the business strategy, economic, more business driving type of information. And as you get closer into that wheel, you have like benefits, career path, culture, work environment, that are like employee engagement, compensation, all those little details that are important as you are trying to bring a candidate in. So I'm just going to keep it at that. There's a lot of information on that. The next thing I'm going to talk about is also skills development of recruiters. So over the years, I have seen less and less investment in our recruiters and sourcers. Now, that's a general statement. Some companies are very good at that. I've always said that if a company isn't investing in you, invest in yourself. It's the best investment possible. And if they don't appreciate it, somebody else will. But I think that's extremely key as you look at your own recruiting engine. How are you developing the recruiters and sourcers. As things change, I mean, this environment is changing extremely fast. And if we're not our skills aren't developed at the top level, then we're going to fall behind. And remember, it doesn't matter how young or old you are, skills development is the new currency. And that's what's going to set you apart from your competition and whatnot. The last thing that I'll speak to is metrics. And all of these things for me are part of the engine. You can get a lot more granular, but this is where I start. Hey, do your metrics today speak to the business needs? And this past week, Sean, you've had some great panelists. And the one thing that you need to really take a look at is what you were using last year may not be really relevant this year. So put your metrics around the business goals and needs for the current, for the current year ahead of you. So that's the top of the things I'll be talking about.
Let me ask you about EVP and kind of, it would feel to me like we have had to do quite a few adjustments in 2020 and then getting ready, fingers crossed, hopefully to come out in 2021. Now, I'm kind of thinking of the EVP as the company messaging, but then also the messaging that the recruiter does with the candidate on that first call. Have we changed our approach or verbiage or what have you as we are in COVID? And I'm assuming so, right? But like, in what ways have we changed that recruiting pitch to the candidate?
I think real briefly, the one thing that I've seen change is the most candidates now that had to go in now are realizing, maybe I don't want to go in. Maybe I don't want to get on the highway for an hour and a half. And I think I can do this job from my home, which they are right now. So I'm seeing things open up now where jobs that required you to come in are they're open for you working remotely. So I think that's a big selling point because work-life integration, that's a real thing in today's millennial talent market, and even some of the mature talent that's looking to ease up a little bit.
Hey, Sean, just to add a little bit to what Bez was sharing, it's not only maybe some of the values that resonate that have changed, but how companies are also demonstrating it during the COVID time. How are we working together, for example? If collaboration is one of our values, how does that look in this age? And I've seen a lot of companies take advantage of writing about how they're doing their values in light of COVID, which certainly shows people, engagement and caring. I think sometimes the hardest thing is probably now showing it by video. What does that look like other than a multi-person Zoom meeting or something like that? That's a challenge for it, but it certainly does require some adjustments in light of COVID.
I've had some struggles with that too, because the team that I manage, I tend to be more of a, very matter of fact. I'm like, hey, we got to get this done. I'm sorry that you have a baby crying in the background and you've got dogs around. I'm struggling with that sometimes. And I'll tell you, the organization that I work for, the grace that we have really encouraged our managers to show has just been incredibly impressive to me. Even the driving part of me that was like, I want to get this done. And so I agree with you, William. I think that there's something to be said about, COVID, the flexibility that we've shown team members as well as, managers and things like that. I think it's only going to evolve over time.
Are we kind of positioning like remote work is just something for 2020 and parts of 2021, or is it go forward? Hey, this is the way it is.
Oh, I think it's go forward. I think that a lot of organizations, we've banned all travel for at least till March of this year. I know Indeed has done that through the end of the year as well. I think that people are discovering they can save money by people being at home.
I agree with Terry. I certainly do think remote work will certainly be more and more of an option. I think there's going to be some challenges, though, that have not been addressed yet. One is, how do we have that spark of inspiration because I had a water cooler, I know that's old school, conversation with somebody in another department. You can't manufacture that sort of situation, or going out to lunch and having coffee with someone. You can to a certain degree if they're in the same area, but if you're completely remote, that makes it really hard to do. I think the second thing is this really stacks longer odds against early career people. You don't have as close of a relationship when you're in the same office building, learning skill sets, soft skills, hard skills, whatever it is. That needs to be figured out. I'm not saying it can't be done, but we have not really figured that out well. And until that happens, I think newer generations of the workforce are going to have a harder time. It's one thing to be self-motivated and self-interested, but there's also something to be said for having a mentor or having somebody have an interest in your growth and being able to invest that time beyond just, doing the video camera. I don't think we've figured that out yet.
Well, and the irony in that, I think, is that younger generation is embracing being remote. And I agree with you 100%. I think that we're missing an opportunity to provide them with mentors, to have those water cooler moments, et cetera. Yeah.
That's going to be very interesting. I always consider myself a bit blessed in my early career because I worked at two companies. The second place I worked and the third place I worked, where the owners were 2 desks down or 2 doors down, and you literally got to see and eavesdrop in on how businesses ran. Yeah, William, that's an interesting point especially for the new career grads and what have you. If they are working remote, yeah, you're basically on your own until your Zoom meetings or emailing. And how much do you learn on those? It's an interesting issue to deal with.
But that's reality. William's bringing up a good point. Is that that segment may struggle. So you're going to have to be intentional of how you do those things. How do you do a water cooler conversation? Because it's not just specifically what we call water cooler, it's the result. What comes out of that? Relationships, knowledge that is not on paper or in an email, and then that mentorship. So you're going to have to figure out how to still replicate that in a virtual environment. And William, I think you're on it. We're still trying to figure it out.
Yeah, from a recruiting perspective, I'm wondering if remote work is going to impact retention, right? Are we going to see a higher turnover because there's just not that much glue to the job? Or they could be, hey, I love working from home. I'm going to sit here and keep doing this. I love it. There's no pressure. There's less stress. From a recruiting perspective, it'll be interesting to see, because if there's loss, well, hey, those recs are going to come back to me, and now I got a higher percentage of backfill recs I got to go work on. Yeah, well, a problem to be solved for another day or another years to get that one figured out.
Yeah.
Guys, I want to come back to you, and this is sort of for all the panelists too, around the skills development with the recruiters and sourcers. Now, some companies, right, decreased recruiting. Some companies sort of maintained. Healthcare probably upticked or what have you. For those companies where the recruiters have a lesser workload than they did pre-COVID, are we instilling training and going to like LinkedIn training or Udemy and trying to instill, hey, while we have a lower rec load, let's go get these skills honed? Or how are we addressing the opportunity, if we have some time, for upskilling our recruiters and sourcers?
Absolutely. You have to, you have to plan that out and make it a part of, something that is on the schedule. Because remember, there are some proactive recruiters and sourcers, and then there's some that are not. But at the end of the day, you're left with whatever skill set you develop. So yeah, you definitely have to make that intentional and put it on the schedule. Bottom line.
I think at Centric, one of the things we've started to do is create that success profile, right? So first off, do you have a list of criteria that are a benchmark for recruiters and or sourcers? And then start to go through a little bit of a maybe evaluation process, self-evaluation, good opportunity to kind of create that connectiveness right now during COVID, and meet with your manager, maybe talk about in a slower time, what are some of those skills that I could go out and work on. So I think it's a great opportunity right now, while I mean, I'm not feeling like things are slower with us anymore like they were a few months ago, but I think, starting with that benchmark of what are the skills, and then there's so many great resources right now.
All right, thank you, Bez. Terry, let's jump over to you and your items.
All right. So I'm Terry Levy. I am responsible for Director of TA for Startups and Transitions at WellPath. Excuse me. WellPath is a healthcare organization that provides clinics inside jails and prisons, and we run forensic hospitals as well. Let's see. What are the questions? Types of roles. So our recruiters hire everything under the sun. So nurses, doctors, PTs, psychiatrists, mental health professionals, etc. Anything you can think of to run a hospital or clinic, we recruit for. So the one thing that I really wanted to throw into the conversation about what you need to tune up your recruiting engine was the voice of the customer. We've spent a lot of time over the last year and a half of really talking about, who is the customer from a recruiting perspective. So we look at three different areas. One is hiring managers. What does the hiring manager need? Is it more of a supply of candidates, and does that relate back to our marketing dollars and marketing contracts? Is the hiring manager looking for training from our recruiters in terms of interviewing and what that process should look like, as well as selection? And then in addition to that, from a voice of the customer perspective, we're also looking at candidates. Are we an employer of choice? What flexibility does the org provide, to William's point of, how can we work on that? And then lastly, TA leadership. So, TA leadership isn't often thought of as the customer, but for our recruiters, it is. And so we operate with a significant amount of metrics, and then we have to look at those metrics a lot to make sure that they meet the business needs.
Terry, when it comes to the hiring manager experience, how are you measuring that to see where you stand? Is it anecdotal, or you do surveys, or how are you gauging that?
We are doing surveys. So we do, we look back every quarter. So we would do at the beginning of Q4, we would do the prior quarter, both the recruiters, the hiring manager, and the candidates. Both candidates we're looking at, hey, did you get this job? Did you not? We're looking at both sets. The hiring manager, we're saying, hey, was the interview process easy? Putting in a requisition, was that hard? What did that look like? Did the recruiter find the right person for your role? And if they didn't or did, how long did they stay? Are they still here with us? What does retention look like? So we're doing that by survey. And then we do that every quarter. Then every year we do an overall survey, again, of those same three groups.
Just kind of, I'm always curious in this, around the process piece of it. Do you send out your surveys like at the end of the quarter looking back, or is it like as the rec gets filled?
Yeah, it's looking back. And this is something we're still looking to massage. We did the first Voice of the Customer project, I think late last year. And we're looking to automate that through our ATS platform. There is, it's ISOMs, and there is some functionality in that. We didn't get approved for the once a year survey again, so we're having to come up with some additional options from a cost perspective, and hopefully we'll be able to find a solution within the applicant database.
Okay. And sorry, just one more question.
Yeah, no, it's good.
Do you reflect back on the recruiters that worked with the hire managers, or is it more of a department-wide type measurement?
We don't have both of them made yet, but when we had the initial results from the paid survey, we looked at both, and we used it not to discipline recruiters, but to just really encourage the conversation of how we can make this better. At the same time, about 2 years ago, WellPath was two companies, and we merged together as one. And during that time, we really had to evaluate, what's the recruiting process at all? How should we build that in? And the voice of the customer became the kind of the resounding thought of how do we go forward so that this is always the forefront of our mind. And so we're looking at that from a metrics perspective. We're looking at that from a survey perspective. We're looking at that from a marketing perspective.
Got it. And to the other panelists, have you ever done the hiring manager surveys where you're getting like data points back versus anecdotal noise, right? Typically, my experience, right? If there's no noise coming back from the hiring managers, there's your
Good.
survey. Right?
Yeah, I think if you're not measuring that, then that white or the no noise is not a good thing, because when it does show up, it sideswipes you. So it's better to get ahead of it and figure out, how can you improve their experience? I mean, you are delivering a service to them.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with that. And I don't, I know we haven't perfected it yet, especially as the organization has changed over the 2 years. But it's definitely one that we recognize is needed. And I think that if you're going to be progressive on the back end, you're going to have to continue to evaluate what that looks like.
Yeah, I was just going to add, in my organization, if we aren't video meeting out, we're close second is we're surveyed out. There are so many surveys going around for so many different good reasons. We've actually taken this offline. I do more of a informal audit conversation with individuals that we either are actively recruiting for as a client or have other ears, if you will, and hear other things. So we're checking in, seeing how they're doing, what have they heard, what's something new we can try, what's something new that we can improve on, and take that back and discuss it as a team. I did that at a prior company and doing it here with really helpful results, because it takes away the anonymity, I guess, of a survey. And we really don't leave the conversation until we get those ideas of what could we be trying, what could be shifting. The interesting thing is having the recruiters do it themselves with their clients. At first, there was a lot of questions. Why are we doing this? I said, well, would you rather hear the feedback from me, or would you rather get it directly from the quote unquote horse's mouth and do something yourself about it? To which that was quickly assimilated, and they've actually been having this maybe about 1 or 2 a month, not a huge rate or number, but just checking the pulse of how things are going within their various different groups. It has also, I've seen in the recruiters, up the level of ownership as in their performance, which is super helpful in a direction I wanted to see us go in.
Yeah, if I could, go ahead, Bess. Go ahead, Bess.
Yeah, you got to be careful. If you have too many surveys going on in your organization, they become less effective, and specifically if you don't do anything with that data. And for that relationship between recruiter and hiring manager, I prefer that old school manual, because it does two things. You get the feedback you need, and number two, you develop the relationship.
Bez, when you say manual, what do you mean by manual?
I wouldn't survey. I would ask my questions in a one-on-one meeting.
Got it. I've become a big fan of, I haven't seen it done a lot, I'm just sort of playing with it myself, is like, it kind of combines what Terry said. It's not a disciplinarian type situation with getting feedback. It's personal development. Combining that with William, I really like that the recruiters are asking for themselves, even if it's whether it's a survey or, as to your point about direct conversations. I really love these short contextual requests for feedback, and with the purpose of personal development, like getting, hey, this just happened, how did I do, right? For keeping it short and sweet, and then getting that feedback back. When I say frequent, I don't mean like to over survey people, but I do think if myself and Lisa just had a conversation, or I did a presentation that Lisa was in the room, and I quickly say, Lisa, how did I do? What'd you think? Click, 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 right? Give me a little rating to go on there. And it comes back to me for my personal development. And as to your point, I'm personally motivated to utilize that. I think that type of development with information coming back from people is an interesting world to get into.
Real time. And there's value in the real time, I think, that you're speaking to, right? Because it's fresh on their minds.
Yep.
The struggle, though, with that is that if you have an organization that is large, I mean, it's very difficult to have that one-on-one conversation on a consistent basis.
That's where you could possibly do a survey.
Right. That's exactly right. That's why we hear that around.
I did a project at a hedge fund company a few years back, and their pure, what do you call it? the peer feedback program was like something that was on steroids. I've never seen it done again. I would never recommend they do it this way. It was done at a company called Bridgewater. They've made it public now. It was just a very intense. So it's like something that's to an extreme. I just keep seeing in moderation and to a much lesser form, getting that feedback back on my personal development is just a good thing to have, so to speak. Now, I won't go down this rabbit hole. It's probably another topic for another discussion, but I'm a big fan of getting feedback and how did I do and getting other people's perspective on how I did. I just think it'll help, especially to William's point. As I say, I'm not going down this rabbit hole. I continue going down it. Being remote work and getting feedback from your peers is going to be harder to do, right? If we're remote, so how do you get that? How did I do? Maybe getting on Slack is the way to go. I don't know, but we'll see. All right, Terry, thank you very much. William, we jump over to you.
Oh, sure. William Ranga, I head up talent acquisition at Spokio, which is based out of Pasadena, California. Been recruiting for about, I'll go with Bez's timeline, 25 years sounds pretty good. And I've been in talent acquisition across various different technology-based companies. So my 5 areas are checking in on business changes, analytic indicators or indications, employment brand, resonation. I'll talk a little bit more about that. Workflow practices, are they quote unquote the best? And then staff, and I'll talk a little bit more about what that means just by that one word. So for business changes, I have, the questions are what's shifted in the last quarter? Are the hot spots that I started with the same ones now? And how can we help? So if I'm not checking in on where the business is going and going to all the meetings, all the company all-hand meeting, reading all the communication, some can get missed. And that can really turn into a blind spot or a surprise that is not fun for anybody. So I really, think that among other things, being tuned to what the business plan is, changes in that is super important. Hopefully it's not happening like a whipsaw every other week, a flavor of the month or something like that. But those important pivots and shifts, shouldn't be missed because that does impact how we, support the business from a talent acquisition standpoint. On the analytics indicators, a little bit to what was mentioned before, I think by Bez, are you measuring what your clients care about? I have a set of measurements that I care about for talent acquisition, kind of internal, but are my analytics for what the business cares about, are they accurate and are they up to date with what they want? By accurate, I mean, have I audited my analytics? Are they accurate? There's nothing worse than saying, having your CFO or CRO call you out for some number that seems not quite to add up. So make sure you're in the weeds auditing, make sure all the data is coming in. We just moved, as an example, from one ATS to another. And I got ahead of that saying we may have some discrepancies here between as we move from one system to another, and then we'll work to minimize that. The great thing was finance actually had somebody join me with that as we look to audit the migration over of data so we can minimize that impact. Love it. So getting ahead of that, and then also testing new metrics. We're a very data intensive company, and I just know almost every meeting I'm going to be asked for a new metric from one of the executives. So to always be playing and experimenting with stuff. I'm not saying the whole dashboard shifts every quarter, but to be playing and checking to see what new insights we can derive is something that I have set aside as a investment of time for the team. Usually it involves me, but sometimes I involve my team members in that too. From an employment resonation standpoint, employment brand standpoint, one, are we listening? Are we really paying attention to what we hear and how well does our brand resonate with candidates that are applying and what they think they know about us and what they care about what they found out. So that includes not just listening, but also engaging. I think one of the best things we've done is we've actually started not only responding to all the Glassdoor reviews, for example, but also soliciting what I would say would be positive Glassdoor reviews in addition to responding to all Glassdoor reviews. And that started an internal campaign for indicators that would be good of certain people to follow up with, and we've been doing that and been meeting that with good success. The responding to the Glassdoor has shown not that we're perfect, but that we're engaged, and that we have found has paid for itself in spades as far as what people care about. They're not looking for the perfect organization. They know that doesn't exist, but they do care about people that are engaged at a place of employment, remote or not. For workflow practices, are they the best? And by I say best with air quotes, are they the best for us in our organization? Are they working as intended? Are they getting us the right noise to signal ratio? Do our clients feel like their time is being well spent with some of those artifacts? We have certain numbers of meetings. We have a launch meeting of the search. We have a calibration meeting with the interview team. We have a debrief meeting after the on-site. That may be great for us, but it may be totally wrong for another organization. And from time to time, we do reviews saying, is this the best use of everybody's time? Why are we meeting? Why do we have somebody go through these steps? Is there a shorter way to get to the same good result? And then once the answer is yes to that, the next question I have is, how well are these best practices understood? I mean, it's one thing for my staff to know what the best practices are, but what they really say is, well, this is just how we do it. That is not advocating best practices. So to have them understand why we have these best practices and be able to replicate the message that we share as a function with the client group is super important. And then next to that is, do our clients understand the best practices and actually support them themselves from that? So there's always a good checkup there to have from a best practice standpoint. And then for staff, are these the right folks I need to move forward with the company? I like what we were talking about earlier from a training standpoint and building into people. I certainly think productivity is a certain key thing to be measuring, but also the engagement of my staff goes from a spectrum of accountability, doing what they say they're going to do, to ownership, in which they actually have their professional self on the line to deliver a project or search, and how much do they own and show leadership in that relationship with the client group and marshaling the sources and or support that they need for it. So those are the 5 areas I've got that I would check for the health of my TA function.
William, let me ask you a quick question. When you talk about analytics that the business looks for versus what your typical recruiting team would have, like I'll give you an example of one that's crossed my paths is managers in a certain department were saying they weren't seeing enough candidates, good quality candidates. So we started measuring number of on-site interviews per rec, right? And we wanted to have recruiters get, 4 to 5 on-site interviews per rec for that department. Not your typical time to fill type metric, but really, from a recruiter's productivity, even though they may have a good hire in that first 3, managers want to see this is where we measure it. Any examples of where, hey, the business came in looking for this, not your typical recruiting metric that an ATS would give out? Any ideas on that?
Well, so that sounds like a productivity or visibility issue. And so there's a couple different ways. I'd probably ask a lot more questions than we have time for here. And it could be what the client thinks they should be getting versus what the market can bear or support relative to the skill set they're looking for and experience. But then there's also the recruiter and how they're managing the hiring manager's expectation. Are you meeting with them? Are you explaining what's going on with the search? Are you out of candidates because there's nobody else that meets this purple squirrel if that's the case, or not simply responding because of maybe some point of brand issue, or I don't know. But there's certain things that we talk about internally, and one thing that I would say is probably that to me is more of an indicator of an internal TA measurement of weekly productivity. How many phone screens did you do? How many turned into manager screens? how many offers to make, that sort of thing. I do measure that internally. I can get that from the ATS, and we weekly sync on that. More for the hiring manager, it would be, what are they looking for in the sense of the profile, and how well are we matching that? Because you can get a lot of productivity, for example. I'm sure we've all seen this, of a lot of candidate activity, but they're wildly off the mark, and that's just throwing, pardon my French, crap over the wall, right? Hoping it sticks and going from there. Then you have another problem that crops up quickly after that you're wasting, our time with, not with candidates don't hit the mark. So I think the productivity aspect of it should certainly be something that's addressed internally within talent acquisition, and should not have to be an issue with a client long term. I think it's more around accuracy, use of their time, and getting the right insight on candidates that most hiring managers, if they're trained, are caring about. And I think that's the other thing. Maybe we just ran through interview training workshop at our company. That was super helpful in putting people on the same page. That could be another source, another need that might need to be done there. I don't know. I don't want to get too prescriptive, because there's a lot. It sounds like there could be a lot going on in that sort of situation.
So another question for you on one of your points, and this is to the whole panel, because I don't know if this is going to be an easy question. Your employment brand resonation with the market space, with in addition to COVID, everything going on, though, to summarize it abruptly, the D&I issues that are going on with companies that we're addressing here in 2020. For employment brand, for D&I, there's an item in the news this week where the CEO of Wells Fargo basically, and I'm paraphrasing here, I don't want to get exactly, and I don't want to get myself into hot water. He came out and basically said, we don't hire enough diversity because there's not enough diverse talent. And he was specifically referring to African Americans. And there's a lot of heat that came back on him for making a statement like that. So as our country goes through the internal issues we're having with D&I, with COVID, as we roll into 2021, and we're trying to, and each company is kind of approaching these situations in their way, how do we know if we're going in the right direction? Is it resonating with the talent market space that we're after, with the whole public relations as a whole? I know this is sort of a big, broad conversation, but how do we know if we're going in the right direction and what we're doing is working when it comes to that employment brand and how we're addressing D&I issues in particular? Any thoughts on that?
I would say, go ahead, Terry.
Okay, thank you. I don't know that we're doing enough just yet, but I think that our company has said, hey, listen, we know this is an issue, and so we're starting that conversation internally. And I think that we'll have to branch it out, if you think of a tree, into the other areas. So from a marketing perspective, from a recruiting perspective, from a sales and perspective. And it's a hard question. It's a really tough question, and it's a tough question within the organization too. And so I don't know that our company has developed a perfect answer just yet. Bez?
I would say, in regards to the CEO of Wells Fargo, if you walk away from that conversation, you can say that they didn't know the market to make a statement like that. So what do you need to do? You need to go look at the data in the region that you're trying to address, such as there's a lot of data out there on federal website and census data websites, and they usually start around airports and sort of go a 50-mile radius on that. So you can get a lot of good data to find out what does it look like? What is that demographic? And because sometimes it's just not about the Blacks or African American. It could be a whole different type of diversity you're talking about, other ethnic origins, or even men and women breakdown. So you really don't know until you start to dig into the data in the region that you're trying to address and say, hey, is my workforce going to look like where we live or work?
I'll add one tool that we use relative to that, because we've talked about it right now, are just male versus female in our company is 60% men, 40% women. And we've looked at certain teams that we'd like to affect diversity along those lines. Well, doing the homework to what Bez was saying is super important. So we actually have a license with Talent Insights by LinkedIn. That's been super helpful in targeting, okay, where are the women data scientists? Where are they now? And be able to determine, okay, if we're not there, either we're okay with them working remotely, good question, or was it a take for them? What are their concerns about picking up and moving to where we are? And then start thoughtfully having questions around programs and opportunities that are related to that. But if you don't know where to go to find and engage these people that you are looking for, it's really hard to start getting what matters to them and what their concerns are.
I think that's just a perfect statement, that you have the ability to find these people in other areas. We use a tool that's similar for that same purpose. If we can't find somebody in some market, then we're going to go out and look in a different one. That tool is called economic modeling, which is what we use. And I'll tell you, the tool is phenomenal, but thinking outside the box to get to that rationalization, William, I think is the biggest key to that.
I bring that problem up because it may not be on TA's desk just today, but it's coming, right? And it's one of those, hey, you better be ready for it, and everybody can see it's coming.
Yeah.
But at this, these Talent Insight I'm familiar with Talent Insights. It's a great tool. You're able now to have realistic conversations with your business leaders. Hey, that purple squirrel that you're looking at for, there's only one and it's over here. And so what's our other choices? So besides diversity and inclusion, you're having other business needs type of conversations.
Yeah, I think that's a great point.
William, you're going to add anything? I don't know if you look like you're going to say something.
No, okay.
All right. Lisa, can we jump over to you? Oh, can't hear you now. Oh, there we go. Now I got you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, great. So I'm Lisa from Chicago. I work at Centric Consulting. We're a mid-sized consulting firm. And today I think I had thought of a couple topics that were maybe a little bit more tactical in nature compared to the conversation that we're having. But, I think one of the key pieces of information for us as of late that we've been looking into is understanding our sources. So where applicants or candidates are coming from, and then using that to make an informed decisions. So, this is an area, for instance, where, I think there was a question in the chat about different tools and resources right now that we might be able to leverage, and being able to tell, where candidates are coming from. Are those the sources that you are, ideally looking for folks to come from? And being able to really put that up against where you think you should be. So for instance, if you're leveraging diversity avenues, are our, applicants from, diversity jobs, for instance, lower than what we'd like them to be? And why is that? Maybe our LinkedIn postings, not as profitable for us, right? Why specifically is that the case? And being able to dig into where you need to retool. For us, lately we've noticed too, our website traffic had been a little bit lower. So we were able to run some specific campaigns to boost that in some different areas. So I just think being able to track, first off, hopefully you can track where applicants and candidates are coming from. And then secondly, being able to make decisions on that. And I think that's key now to look into because of, the whole conversation we're having, right, around attracting the right folks into our organization and making sure that the flow is coming from the ideal spots. So that was one topic that we're thinking of. Another one, definitely just that idea of how do you get candidates into the process that maybe haven't gotten back to us? That is not as much of a major, issue now, right? At least I feel like, if you've struggled with replies in the past, it might be a little bit easier now, given market conditions. But we've tried, a couple different things for some challenging searches, especially as we're saying, if the talent pool is less, you maybe don't have, the next nugget to go out and find, right? You have to focus on attracting the attention of those individuals. So throwing out different ideas like, can we potentially get creative and send on behalf of someone else, right? Not the recruiter, but maybe someone else in the organization. So just how to increase the number of new candidates coming in if we're reaching out to them and to get more replies. And then another big area that's key is assessing how long candidates are sitting in each stage. I think we've talked about that in another session or panel recently, but just evaluating ways to reduce it if it's too long. Is it, if it's okay, that's great, but obviously this has an impact on candidate experience, right? So I think earlier this year, we did one of these checks and noticed too much time that we'd like to see in stage to stage. So we implemented some time boxed it, right? So a commitment of, or an SLA of 48-hour turnaround time at a maximum from each step. And then we also realized that we were taking longer than what we wanted because we were waiting on some feedback from folks. So we've also instituted, you interview a candidate on Thursday at, 12:47. You have until, 12:47 the following day to get us your feedback, because that was another aspect slowing down. So those are a couple things that we're thinking about and talking about here at Centric.
Lisa, kind of sticking with the analogy of the engine tune-up, when you get into like tactical measurements that you're describing, one thing that I love when you create a dashboard, or everybody's got their version of a dashboard, the radial chart, like on your car, like the whole RPM thing, the green, yellow, red, as far as like an RPM indicator, I always thought was a great summary of watching those granular metrics. Are we doing it right? It's in the green. Are we getting a little low? It's in the yellow. Hey, we're missing over here. It's in the red. Just to have a dashboard made it very easy to understand, very quick. Hey, we're all in the green. Good. Let's go do our real work. So getting into those tactical metrics, I love that little, I think it was called a radial dial as far as the dashboard goes. I did have a question for you around sources. So do you, and this sort of goes for the whole panel too, typically we track source of hire, right? And it kind of sticks to that. I always like to roll it back a little bit and not look at the quantity of hires that come from a source, but getting into the quality of candidates that come from a source. So I'd always roll it back from the source of hire to source of on-site interviews, because to me that kind of reflected quality. Do you kind of roll back your source and look at more than just hiring, and to kind of help us determine where our quality candidates are coming from? It kind of relates back to the diversity thing I was talking about. Where are the, if we can't find them, where are the ones that we have found? Do you roll back your source tracking at all?
We do. We track at source, or initial stage. We also track at the on-site interviews, so when we have folks come in for that final stage, and then we track who's getting placed. So I think pretty consistently, and there was a question in the chat from Catherine, the breakdown is our employee referrals are by and large the number one most successful quality indicator at each stage. Generally though, they're winning out at the higher stage, and then there are more individuals that have been referred coming in for in-site interviews or on-site. Nothing's on site anymore, those final stage interviews from employee referrals. And then we have a couple other sources directly from, reach outs from recruiters that are also successful, but we do track it at all stages. And I do think that's valuable, Sean.
How about other panelists? Do you go deeper in that?
We do care about the conversion ratio. I mean, it's one thing to have people that apply, and we certainly would rather not have a whole lot of noise and signal there, but where people start spending their time. So the people that are screened by recruiters, how many of those get passed on to the hiring manager? Then you really got some time involvement if you have a couple screens there. So how many of those make it to on-site? That's where you start involving lots of people's time. And so if you're wanting to be efficient, what are the sources that are really producing that well? What can improve that? There's certainly some practices there, but yeah, we do. I do care about the recruiters not wasting the hiring manager's time. So we're looking at least like a 75 to 80% conversion rate of the hiring manager to on-site. Otherwise, hiring managers are wasting your time. We're not getting good enough quality for that. For the other things that we're starting to question too, for example, on where we post, we're tinkering around with the idea of maybe we just pull off all of the job slots that we've given as part of packages to LinkedIn, Glassdoor, and so forth. Maybe we just run it ourselves through a third party and manage per skill set where we actually post for looking for better search results. So we're kind of questioning a lot of things. And then the other aspect too is our dashboards have been up to this point manually done in Google spreadsheets. So we're finally taking the next step to get I guess what you call a BI connector downloaded to our version of Tableau, and we're going to start running that, which is going to be updated nightly, which we hope will give us much more quicker turnaround than having to wait for a monthly, update of the dashboard.
You will really love that. We use it's a morning run on Tableau for the exact same purpose. You'll be like a kid in a candy shop, slicing and dicing the numbers. We also use the same type of metrics, Lisa, that you've implemented. Our struggle has been, we did roll out a hiring manager SLA as well. And we've had a little bit harder time adopting that over, the first 3 or 4 months. But then once we started seeing those numbers, and we could clearly tell where we were losing candidates because hiring managers weren't providing feedback or they weren't calling candidates in a timely manner. Once we started providing that data to our operations team and holding them accountable to the same SLAs that they really wanted from us, we started seeing an actual, like a handshake work process. So instead of having, each team blaming the other, we actually found groups trying to work together to make sure those numbers were good across the board. So kudos to you for putting in the SLAs.
Well, it's not perfect, but no one likes to see their name in red, right, as owing something. So
exactly.
That's some advice we received, and that actually has worked somewhat well. So
yes, when I've done recruiter scorecards in the past, and when your name's always at the bottom, you better start doing something different. If it's a few times, okay, but every week, really? What's going on here? All right. Hey, thank you, everybody. We went pretty long on this one, but it was a really good conversation. I much appreciate it. Any final thoughts or comments around doing these check-ins as we go into Q4 and out of it, hopefully pretty soon? Any final thoughts or comments on checkups?
It's a good time to be doing it now before you have to ask for a budget, right?
Yeah, it's budget season, right?
That's right. Exactly.
Let me ask you real quick. How are you managing your budgets given kind of, hey, what's going to happen in 2021? Are we just driving through it, or is it kind of a roadblock because it's a little bit unknown?
For us, we suspended travel, so we've had some significant dollar savings there. But our CFO is trying to take some of that budget away. So we're trying to reallocate for 2021.
Yeah.
we are putting together some proposals, although we don't know if we're going to get the money, just at least starting to evaluate different tools, figure out if we did get the money, what would we want to spend it on? So who knows, we might be, using energy that, in an area where we might not even get the funds, but we feel like it's worth it to at least explore the tools, learn, and thanks to these panels, right, you can always get a lot of great ideas about new tools. So we're putting together some plans, but we're just not sure if we're going to get the green light.
Yeah.
What I'm seeing is plan A, plan B scenarios because they're not, it's a little fluid right now on budgets. And so they have to sort of work out, at least 2 different scenarios in the event it goes down one path.
And I would say, we're always testing and trying. We always get hit up by new vendors to try something new, and trying to ferret out what the truth is behind the marketing and everything else becomes important. But sometimes it does merit bigger conversations. The actual review of what we're giving out to other companies for our job slots is something seriously that we're thinking we may repackage our spend differently next year, and either do it third party or do it ourselves, since that's how we do our marketing as it is digital marketing. So always experimenting with new tools. Definitely we'll be going back to all of our vendors and renegotiating, hopefully for some savings. Is kind of a default move. They should be expecting that this year. And then, looking for opportunities to, define or discover new value if there's something new that they have.
All right. Well, thank you very much, everybody. I greatly appreciate it. And with that said, thank you, everybody, and I will talk to you soon.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.